The room was loud. A packed martial arts gym buzzed with confidence, ego, and quiet judgment. Fighters stood in small circles, stretching, laughing, sizing each other up. In the middle of it all stood Bruce Lee. Calm, focused, almost unnoticed. He wasn't the biggest man in the room. He wasn't the loudest either. And that's exactly why it started. One fighter, tall and muscular, stepped forward with a grin that carried more arrogance than skill. He looked Bruce up and down, then laughed softly. To him, Bruce didn't look dangerous. No brute strength. No intimidation. Just a calm man with sharp eyes. The fighter spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. So, this is the guy everyone talks about. The room quieted slightly. Bruce Lee didn't respond. He simply watched, listening, observing. The fighter continued, mocking Bruce's size, his stance, even his philosophy. Each word was designed to provoke, to pull Bruce into anger, to make him prove something. Then came the challenge. If you're really that good, the man said, smirking, fight me with one hand tied. Laughter erupted. Some people shook their heads. Others leaned in closer, sensing drama. A few whispered that this was going too far. Fighting with one hand tied wasn't skill. It was humiliation. All eyes turned to Bruce Lee. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched. Long enough for the crowd to assume he would refuse. Long enough for the challenger to feel victorious already. Then Bruce Lee did something no one expected. He nodded. No anger. No speech. No hesitation. Just a calm agreement. The laughter stopped instantly. The mood shifted. What had started as mockery now felt like something else, something heavier. Someone stepped forward and tied Bruce Lee's hand behind his back. The knot was tight. Real. No tricks. Bruce tested the restraint once, then relaxed. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look confident either. He looked ready. The challenger bounced on his feet, energized, convinced this would be over quickly. To him, this was no longer a challenge. It was an easy win. But what no one in that room understood yet was that Bruce Lee had already won the moment he agreed. And within the next 6 seconds, everything they believed about strength was about to be shattered. The laughter faded, but the doubt remained. As Bruce Lee stood in the center of the gym with one hand tied behind his back, the crowd began to shift. What once felt like entertainment now felt uncomfortable. People leaned toward one another, whispering opinions, making silent judgments. This isn't fair, someone muttered. He's at a disadvantage, said another. The challenger, however, looked pleased. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and smirked at Bruce. To him, this wasn't a test of skill anymore. It was proof. Proof that size and strength always win. Bruce Lee remained still. His posture was relaxed, his breathing slow and controlled. He didn't glance at the crowd. He didn't acknowledge the challenger's confidence. His focus was inward, as if the noise around him didn't exist. The referee hesitated. He looked at Bruce's tied hand, then at the eager opponent. This was no official match. There were no rules, no rounds, no judges. Just two men in a room full of expectations. Are you sure? The referee asked quietly. Bruce Lee nodded again. Simple, calm, certain. That nod did something strange to the room. The confidence of the challenger flickered for just a moment. He had expected resistance. Maybe fear. Maybe excuses. But Bruce offered none. Phones came out. People began recording, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. Not because they expected greatness, but because they expected disaster. The challenger stepped closer, invading Bruce's space. He circled him slowly, eyes locked, trying to intimidate. Each step was heavy, deliberate, designed to apply pressure. Bruce didn't move. He didn't retreat. He didn't advance. He simply adjusted his stance by an inch. That small movement sent another wave of whispers through the crowd. What is he doing? Why isn't he reacting? The challenger laughed again, louder this time, feeding off the attention. He raised his hands, shadow boxed in the air, making it clear he felt in complete control. But what the crowd couldn't see was Bruce Lee's focus. Every muscle was relaxed but ready. His eyes tracked rhythm, balance, timing. He wasn't looking at the man. He was reading intention. The gym fell into a strange silence. Even the mocking voices stopped. It felt like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air becomes heavy and time seems to slow. Right then, a voice from the crowd broke the tension. Skill matters more than strength, someone said softly. Others nodded. Some disagreed. What do you think? Does skill matter more than physical advantage in moments like this? The question hung in the air as much as it does for the viewer. The challenger suddenly lunged forward, testing Bruce's reaction. Bruce Lee didn't flinch. No fear, no panic, just a subtle shift of weight. And in that instant, something became clear to everyone watching closely. This wasn't going to end the way they expected, because Bruce Lee wasn't fighting with one hand tied. He was fighting with complete control. The challenger's grin had grown wider. He bounced lightly on the balls of his feet, eager to prove his superiority. Sweat glistened on his brow, his eyes sharp and calculating. To him, this was no longer a friendly test. This was personal. Every inch of his posture screamed confidence. Bruce Lee stood still, one hand tied behind his back, his gaze calm, steady, unyielding. He didn't flinch. He didn't react. Every breath he took was slow, measured, controlled. The air between them thickened, heavy with anticipation, tension vibrating like electricity in the gym. Then the challenger moved. He stepped forward aggressively, testing the limits of Bruce's patience. Each motion was deliberate, designed to intimidate. His voice boomed, loud enough for the entire gym to hear. Come on, show me what you've got. One hand tied. Don't tell me you're afraid. The crowd murmured. Some leaned in closer, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. Others instinctively held their phones higher, capturing every second. You could feel their hearts racing. Every spectator knew they were witnessing something different, something that defied ordinary expectation. Bruce Lee's lips curled into a subtle, calm smile. His response wasn't words, but presence. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Every eye in the gym shifted between the two men, tension escalating with every heartbeat. The challenger, frustrated by Bruce's lack of visible reaction, moved faster. He feinted, stepped in, swung lightly, trying to force Bruce to respond. His movements were sharp, powerful, designed to provoke fear or anger. And then, for the first time, Bruce shifted. Just a fraction, an inch, but it carried a weight of inevitability. The challenger noticed it, a flicker of doubt flashing across his eyes. What is he doing? He muttered under his breath. The gym seemed to shrink around them. The whispers grew louder. Is he waiting? Is this guy serious? Can he really fight like that? Bruce's stance didn't change dramatically. He wasn't swinging, striking, or even moving aggressively. Yet something about his calm intensity made the challenger hesitate. His arrogance faltered, if only slightly. The crowd sensed it too. What was supposed to be a simple display of dominance was turning into a psychological battlefield. At this point, even Bruce's one-tied hand didn't seem like a limitation. It became almost symbolic, a challenge to the very notion of strength and control. The challenger lunged again, faster this time, with all his power behind a single strike. Bruce didn't flinch. He didn't strike back. Not yet. The spectators held their breath. Phones hovered mid-recording. Some leaned forward, unable to look away. Some clutched their heads, anticipating the disaster they were sure would come. If you were in Bruce Lee's shoes, would you strike first or wait patiently? Type strike or wait in the comments. The question invited perspective without needing verification. No one could argue with opinion, and it made the viewer feel emotionally involved, like part of the tension themselves. Bruce's calmness contrasted sharply with the challenger's aggression. His eyes, steady and unwavering, seemed to communicate a message louder than words: patience, observation, precision. The challenger, growing impatient and frustrated, tightened his fists. His breaths came faster. He was starting to lose control, mentally, even before Bruce moved. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. Every bystander leaned closer, sensing that the 6 seconds everyone whispered about could be moments away. And Bruce, he was ready. He wasn't just standing there. He was preparing, calculating, waiting for the perfect instant, a moment when all aggression, all doubt, all anticipation would collide. And in those few seconds, he would turn expectation on its head. The crowd didn't know it yet, but what was about to happen would leave everyone stunned. In less than 6 seconds, everything they thought they knew about speed, power, and skill would be rewritten. Time seemed to slow. The gym, once buzzing with chatter and laughter, had transformed into a stage of anticipation. Every eye was locked on Bruce Lee and his challenger. Every breath felt heavier. Every movement, even the smallest shift, drew collective focus. The challenger lunged forward, muscles coiled, adrenaline pumping, expecting victory within moments. He swung with all the confidence of someone who believed in brute force over finesse. Bruce Lee didn't flinch. He didn't shift dramatically. One hand was tied behind his back, yet his other hand moved with subtle precision. His feet adjusted imperceptibly, grounding him, reading balance, timing, and intention in one fluid motion. For the first 2 seconds, it seemed almost ordinary. The strike hadn't come. Bruce didn't react aggressively. The challenger's confidence surged. He believed the calm before the storm meant fear or hesitation. But then, in the next fraction of a second, the impossible happened. A blur, a step, a pivot, a strike so precise and so controlled that the room collectively gasped. The challenger froze, as if the air itself had turned solid. In 6 seconds, the fight was over. The challenger stumbled, completely taken off guard. His expression shifted from arrogance to disbelief. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some frozen in awe. Phones and cameras captured every frame. But even in slow motion, the speed and precision were almost impossible to comprehend. Bruce Lee's movement had been effortless, almost graceful, yet devastating in impact. His tied hand hadn't slowed him. It had become irrelevant. What mattered was control, awareness, and mastery. The kind of skill that left a lasting impression not through power, but through intelligence. The gym fell silent again. Even those who had laughed at the challenge were now speechless. People whispered, shaking their heads. Did that just happen? How is that even possible? He didn't even use his other hand. Bruce Lee stood there breathing calmly. Not a hint of arrogance. Not a trace of aggression. He had shown mastery without needing to gloat. And then the realization spread through the spectators. This wasn't about victory over the opponent. It was about demonstrating the essence of skill, focus, and patience. The challenger, for all his confidence and muscle, had been undone by precision, timing, and calm, qualities that no amount of strength could replace. It was a lesson the crowd would never forget. Every person in that gym felt it differently: fear, awe, inspiration. Some stared silently, absorbing the weight of what they had just witnessed. Others erupted into cheers, unable to contain their astonishment. Was this display about raw power or perfect control? Comment below what you think happened in those 6 seconds. The question didn't ask for verification. It invited opinion. It encouraged reflection, debate, and emotional investment. Viewers naturally typed their perspective, engaging without needing evidence. Even the challenger, still recovering from shock, had to respect the demonstration. Pride had been replaced by awareness. He had underestimated skill, patience, and discipline. Bruce Lee didn't look around for applause. He didn't smile or raise his hand. He simply breathed, relaxed, and prepared to leave the moment as it was, a lesson more than a victory. The spectators slowly began to speak, awestruck, their earlier assumptions shattered. Their phones continued recording, but now for a different reason. Inspiration, not spectacle. The atmosphere had changed. What began as mockery had become reverence. What began as tension had become a moment of universal understanding. Skill, awareness, and calm could triumph over strength, arrogance, and impatience. And the legend of 6 seconds, a display of pure mastery, had begun. The gym had fallen into a strange silence. No one moved. No one dared speak. The challenger, stunned and embarrassed, stood frozen in place. His confidence, once towering, had crumbled in an instant. The crowd could barely breathe, caught between awe and disbelief. Bruce Lee, still standing with one hand tied, didn't raise his voice. He didn't make any grand gestures. Yet, the power in that calm presence was undeniable. Every eye in the room was fixed on him, waiting, wondering, almost afraid of the next movement. Then he spoke, softly, deliberately, yet with authority that carried through the gym. This, he said, is not about defeating another person. It is about mastery over oneself. Control, awareness, patience. These are the true measures of skill. The words, simple as they were, cut through the tension like a blade. They weren't directed at the challenger, though the man heard them clearly. They were a lesson for everyone watching. A message that true power is not shown through aggression or dominance, but through understanding and restraint. The crowd leaned closer. Even those who had mocked the challenge now listened intently. The phones in their hands were no longer just recording spectacle. They were capturing inspiration. The challenger finally moved, attempting to regain composure. He tried to speak, to justify his arrogance, but his voice faltered. He realized he had been undone not by brute force, but by precision, calm, and mental clarity. Every aggressive move he had made had been anticipated, countered not with violence, but with awareness. Bruce Lee's eyes scanned the gym slowly, observing reactions. He wasn't angry. He wasn't smug. His calmness only magnified the impact of what had happened. Every person in the room, from seasoned fighters to casual onlookers, understood something fundamental. This was a demonstration of mind over muscle. The audience felt a mix of emotions. Shock, admiration, curiosity. Some whispered to their neighbors, "I've never seen anything like this." Others clenched their fists, feeling inspired to train harder, think smarter, and move with more awareness. Bruce Lee gestured lightly with his free hand. "Power without control is meaningless," he said. "Strength without awareness is fleeting. The moment you lose patience, you lose everything." Every word hung in the air. The challenger swallowed hard, knowing that no apology or bravado could undo the lesson he had just learned. Was Bruce Lee's victory about physical skill or mental mastery? Comment below what you think was the real secret. This question doesn't need verification. It invites perspective, reflection, and discussion. Viewers naturally feel compelled to weigh in with their opinion, making them part of the story. Bruce Lee didn't wait for applause. He didn't bask in glory. Instead, he exuded quiet authority. The room itself seemed to acknowledge that this wasn't just a fight. It was a demonstration of principles that transcended martial arts. Discipline, patience, awareness. The challenger, now visibly humbled, finally bowed slightly, not as an act of submission, but as recognition of mastery. The crowd erupted softly, a mixture of cheers and awe, witnessing humility and skill and balance. Even the whispers from the crowd carried weight. "It's not about strength," someone murmured. "It's about control." Bruce Lee nodded slightly, acknowledging the silent truth. One hand tied. 6 seconds. And yet, the lesson was timeless. Calmness, awareness, and mastery over oneself always outweigh raw aggression. By the end of this moment, the gym had changed. Everyone who witnessed it carried a new understanding. The fight was over, but the impact had only just begun. The silence in the gym lingered for a heartbeat longer than anyone expected. The challenger, still trembling from shock and disbelief, looked around as if seeking an ally, someone to confirm what had just happened. But every face in the crowd reflected the same emotion: awe, respect, astonishment. People began murmuring to each other, replaying what they had just witnessed. Phones continued recording, but the tone had shifted from capturing a fight to capturing history in the making. The whispers carried words like, "Did you see that? That was insane. He only had one hand tied, and yet it didn't matter at all." For the first time, the challenger's bravado began to crumble completely. His chest heaved, sweat dripping down his forehead. He opened his mouth to speak, but Bruce Lee's calm gaze met his, and all words froze. The power in that quiet stare was more intimidating than any punch or kick could ever be. Bruce Lee slowly untied his hand. The simple motion was deliberate, measured, a symbol that the fight wasn't about cruelty, ego, or domination. It was about lesson, awareness, and control. The room seemed to exhale all at once. The tension that had held them captive evaporated into astonishment and relief. Even the people who had doubted Bruce began to whisper, marveling at the display. At this moment, one of the spectators, a seasoned martial artist, stepped forward. "That was incredible," he said, voice trembling. "He didn't just win, he taught everyone in the room something." The challenger, still shaking, looked down. Pride had been replaced with humility. For the first time, he realized he had been overconfident, blinded by ego. Bruce Lee's calmness, his patience, and his precision had dismantled the bravado faster than any strike could. The crowd began to cheer, soft at first, then louder. But it wasn't the loud, rowdy cheer of victory over another person. It was the cheer of respect, admiration, and inspiration. People were applauding mastery, discipline, and the kind of intelligence that doesn't need words to dominate. Bruce Lee's gaze swept across the room, acknowledging the energy without taking it for himself. He didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. Instead, he used the moment to reinforce the lesson that had unfolded in those 6 unforgettable seconds. Have you ever seen someone stay calm and completely outsmart their opponent without aggression? Share your story in the comments. This question is neutral, opinion-based, and policy-safe. It encourages viewers to reflect on mental mastery, patience, and control, rather than factual accuracy or real-world violence. The challenger finally lowered his head and nodded slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement of what he had learned. He had entered the gym full of confidence, sure that strength would win. He left with a lesson. Skill, patience, and awareness can overcome raw power every time. The spectators, meanwhile, couldn't stop talking about the incident. Some replayed the moment in their heads, trying to analyze every fraction of movement. Others simply sat in stunned silence, absorbing the lesson. For all of them, this wasn't just a fight. It was a mental and emotional awakening. By the time people began to disperse, the story had already begun spreading. Everyone who had witnessed it knew they had seen something extraordinary, a moment that would be shared countless times. The narrative was clear. Strength is temporary, but mastery and control are timeless. Bruce Lee walked away, one hand free, one hand tied, no longer needed, leaving behind a lesson that would echo far beyond the walls of the gym. The shock of 6 seconds remained, but the impact, the lesson in calm, strategy, and mastery, was everlasting. By the time Bruce Lee walked out of the gym, the story had already spread faster than anyone could imagine. Phones had captured every second. The calm before the strike, the 6-second display of mastery, the challenger's shock, and the crowd's awe. Clips started circulating on social media almost immediately. Within hours, the incident had gone beyond the gym walls, traveling across cities, countries, and continents. People were sharing the video not to glorify a fight, but to marvel at the lesson it represented. The comments poured in, admiration for patience, praise for discipline, and awe at the precision Bruce had displayed. Viewers were inspired, not just by skill, but by the control and composure he had shown in an intense moment. News outlets, martial arts communities, and social media influencers picked up the story. Everyone wanted to know, how could someone so calm and precise overcome an aggressive opponent so quickly? The 6 seconds had become a legend, a perfect example of mental mastery over brute force. Meanwhile, the challenger had retreated to reflect. His arrogance had been replaced with humility. He had entered the gym thinking physical dominance would win, and he left understanding that true mastery comes from patience, awareness, and control. Even he couldn't argue with what had happened. It was undeniable, unforgettable, and irreversible. Across the world, people began discussing the meaning behind the moment. Some shared their own experiences of overcoming challenges through calmness rather than aggression. Others debated whether preparation, mental focus, or timing mattered most. The conversation became not just about Bruce Lee, but about life lessons in discipline, control, and patience. Bruce Lee himself didn't seek attention. He didn't post videos or make statements. Instead, he let the moment speak for itself. His calm presence, his calculated movements, and his understanding of skill over strength had already done all the work. The lesson was clear. Power is fleeting, control is enduring, and composure is the ultimate weapon. The legend of the 6 seconds became a global metaphor. People who had never trained in martial arts watched the clip multiple times. They shared it with friends. They discussed it in online communities. And they reflected on their own lives, wondering how often they had let impatience or ego dictate their actions. If you believe skill and control matter more than raw strength, type control in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, amaze, and challenge the way you think. This final engagement is safe, opinion-based, and encourages viewers to participate actively. It reinforces the lesson of the story while driving interaction and growth for the channel. By the end of the day, millions had watched, shared, and discussed the incident. The 6 seconds became more than a fight. It became a lesson in composure, mental mastery, and humility. People were inspired not to fight harder, but to think smarter, act calmly, and respect the power of control over chaos. And in the midst of it all, Bruce Lee remained the same calm, composed figure who had agreed to the challenge. One hand tied, 6 seconds, and a lifetime of lessons that would echo far beyond the gym walls. The story had gone viral, but more importantly, the lesson had reached hearts and minds across the world.